All right, all right. Good evening, New York, and good evening, NAACP family. Thank you for tuning in to the July briefing. We missed a couple of months, but it's good to have you back. As you know, my name is Chris Alexander, and I'm the executive director of the NAACP New York State Conference. It's an honor to be here with you tonight on behalf of our conference president, Eldray Williams, our executive leadership team across the state. We are just so excited to be able to keep going with these sessions, to check in with you all, make sure that you're aware of policy developments, of the organizing work that we're doing across the state. I'm going to give you a couple of those updates, and then we're going to jump into a really important conversation. This conversation is going to focus on the Education Freedom Tax Credit, which will be a federal voucher program that the federal administration is getting ready to roll out right here in New York. And so we have some experts joining us from the Legal Defense Fund, as well as our own NAACP leaders who will be talking about the program and what you all need to know about it, and making sure that you all are aware of an upcoming town hall that we'll be having on August 17th at Hofstra University. We'll give you more details as we move forward. Also, quick shout out to our Ma Dukes t-shirts, which we have for sale. It's a continued fundraiser that we've been doing for a while, supporting the youth in the state. So make sure that you all get on the website to get one. So let's jump right in. Last week, we were on Randall's Island. We were able to participate in Curl Fest, an incredible event. We brought 15,000 people together to learn about Black beauty products. It was a beautiful event. Culture was all over the place. It was incredible. We were there on behalf of the state conference talking about the Beauty Justice Act, a bill sponsored by Senator Leah Webb, focused on making sure that we get toxins out of those beauty products, and we make sure that our producers are doing a little bit more to prioritize the health and safety of New York's consumers. We know these products can be dangerous. We know that the toxins in them have been well reported to be carcinogens in many cases. And so making sure that we can get lead out of those products is an important piece. And we're going to keep working on that all year. So if you're interested in learning more, please tap in with us and learn more about the work we're doing on beauty justice. It was an incredible conversation. And you know, honestly, I had a lot of fun. We also last week had convention. We all just got back from Chicago, where we had our national convention. We were joined also by thousands and thousands of advocates from across the country. Our delegates attended. We were well represented as the state conference. It was a great space for not just our exchange of ideas, but also an exchange of tactics and strategies. You know, from a climate summit that happened. We'll talk a little bit about what came out of that, but also being able to connect with other organizers on issues that they're dealing with in their communities. The National Convention remains a pretty important place for convening the leaders who are doing the work on the front lines to protect and keep our communities safe. One of the things that came out of that climate summit really was the love that was given to Governor Hochul for being the first to institute a moratorium on data centers. Communities across the country are dealing with the scourge of data centers, the noise pollution and the potential waste that could be coming from them, really pushing for those centers to come online in ways that incorporate community input, that are safe, that use clean energy. You know, we have a data center campaign running, coming down from national, but also that we're pushing on. We supported the moratorium, and we're thankful and have put out a statement acknowledging the governor's work on implementing that moratorium. You know, across the nation right now, those data centers have been consuming enormous amounts of energy, threatening to displace vital infrastructure and create air and noise pollution. So it's been necessary for our branches to be on the front lines in the communities that they serve, calling for some more intentional community collaboration, some more transparency, and really some strengthened community agreements. You know, from Niagara to Long Island and Mid-Hudson, these data centers that have been proposed, our leaders have been on the front lines making sure that they are done and developed with community input. We've also seen, I think, from our advocacy in both Brookhaven and Long Island, I believe the town of Islip as well, shorter moratoriums imposed on the local level again, trying to get a handle and a better understanding of what the impact of these data centers will have on their communities in which they're being sited. The executive order came down from Governor Hochul, made New York the first state, as I said. The pausing is just of new data centers, and it's only of data centers that are over, I believe, 50 megawatts. So there's a bunch in that lower category that we're hoping also get included and make sure that we're doing an assessment of their impact. This is a positive first step, but it definitely has its limitations. And so we're looking forward to some more actions from the state legislature and from the governor. I know there's a bill, I believe, still sitting on her desk that would impose a broader moratorium and ensure that all the potential impacts are being properly assessed. So we're still pushing for that, but we're proud of the works that our branches have been doing, and we will continue to navigate this issue alongside them. It remains a really important issue, and so we're looking forward to continuing to engage on that. We're also hearing and standing quite closely with our allies, Black immigrant families, particularly our Haitian neighbors. We saw last week TPS, the program granting temporary protective status to Haitian migrants who've come from the island to New York. Mostly, I think we got about 100,000 Haitians in New York. We saw their TPS status revoked. And so as coalition members and partners of the Hands Off NYC organizing effort, we are trying to make sure that those folks have as many resources as possible. We've seen an increased ICE presence across the city, particularly in Queens, where I'm from. And we remain incredibly concerned. Thankfully, Hands Off has been doing training across the city, making sure that communities are prepared and taught how to better protect their neighbors, how to raise alerts, how to ensure that we don't lose people. You've heard me talk about this issue for a while and the organizing work being done. There's some incredible organizations leading it, and we're honored to stand with them. The administration has already terminated TPS for 10 other countries. So that, the Haitians are not alone in this, but knowing that there's such a large community of Haitians here in New York who are contributing to our communities, who are our family members, our friends, we are ready to stand with them and to do all that we can to protect them. This is not the framing of immigration enforcement that I think was laid out at the early days of this administration. As you all have seen, we've made comments as ICE has, sowed chaos in communities across the state and really across the country. And so we're going to continue to train. Hands Off is offering trainings regularly across the boroughs and resources for families who are under fear of deportation, and to make sure that they have all the information that they need. We're moving quickly here. We got a couple more updates before we jump into this conversation. You see, I'm going through my notes. We're also in the midst of all of this federal action, still trying to make sure that New Yorkers are prepared and ready for the midterm elections. We've been hosting democracy summits, and a lot of our partner organizations are also engaging in this necessary election protection work, making sure that everybody is aware of their polling locations, is aware of any changes to polling hours, location hours, so that they don't miss their opportunity to engage in the process. We're facing a wave of attacks on Black voting power nationwide, from racially discriminatory redistricting, which you've heard us talk about, to the deconstruction of campaign finance laws, to even the attempt to dismantle mail-in voting, which thankfully we have a victory there. As we discussed previously with Citizen Action, I think Karen Wharton was on the show a couple months ago in our April briefing. This is not just an issue in one part of the state. This is an issue everywhere. And so we're going to continue. I know Charles Johnson, our civic engagement chair, has been leading the Democracy Summit trainings, to preparing our branch leaders and our organizational partners as well to increase voter registration and turnout, and to make sure that everybody is prepared for any type of nonsense that happens on election day or during early voting. We have a command center that we're working on with other organizations who are prepared to, as we have a slew of attorneys and other organizers to make sure that your vote is protected and that you are able to exercise your right to vote. And so I just want to make sure that we're talking about that always. That is a key component of our work, making sure that we're able to exercise our right to vote. And so I want to make sure to highlight that. As always, These updates are just a few of the projects that we're tackling. If you care about these issues and want to get involved in our work, we're always looking for new people to join as members, as leaders, as advocates. You know, when I'm at press conferences, I can see folks that have a strong desire to be part of something bigger. And this is the opportunity. There's so many major policy shifts happening. I want you all to know that the NAACP is here as a place where we can navigate this uncertainty and come together as a community to fight forward for a better future. We've got committees doing work across these issues, from education, which we'll talk about at length, to civic engagement, criminal justice. If you're interested in joining the fight, if you are annoyed and pissed off on what's happening in the world, come join us. We like to fight too. And so this is a great opportunity for you all. I always look at these crisis moments as the opportunities that they are to get voters engaged and participating in the process. Because if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. All right. Those are my updates. There's a lot of stuff going on. Please, you know, there'll be a link at the end of the stream where you can sign up for our newsletter. We send it out monthly, all the work that's being done, both at the state conference level and at the branch level. There's a lot going on there. We want to make sure that you all are a part of the solution and engage in these fights. You know, this is what is dictating our daily lives. And so we want to make sure that we're participating and that we're not passengers on this ride. All right, those are my updates. Let's get into the discussion. We're going to be talking about what we call the education, what is called the Education Freedom Tax Credit Program. Now, there is a lot to say about this program. I think the one thing that's most important to start with is the appropriate framing, right? Historically, and we'll get into our experts who will lay out the full scope of this program, but you may hear it referred to as a voucher program, right? And that is because we have a history post segregation, the end of segregation, of states creating what we call voucher programs, a way for white kids in certain communities to go to non-segregated schools and to be reimbursed for any costs that are used in the pursuit or in their effort to join those schools. Now, this is not a new concept, but in the Big Beautiful Bill, there's a new twist on it. We call it a voucher program with some extra steps. And so we're going to dive straight into that. Because the income threshold of these programs is significant, there's going to be a lot of eligible participants to participate in this program. And so I know folks are going to be made aware of it. We want to make sure that it's clear that right now there's 54% of all students would be potentially eligible or reside in a state that has already opted in. We have 31 states that have opted in. We have only 4 states that have said that they will not opt in. And our governor here in New York is still considering it. And so we have some work to do here to make sure that resources are not diverted away from not just public education, but from the public good altogether. And so on the main event tonight, we're talking about a new federal program that's going to take effect this January. It has the potential to divert significant amount of public dollars to private schools. The name of it, the official name, as I said, is the Education Freedom Tax Credit. But as we said, we're calling it a voucher program with extra steps. Since the landmark Brown versus Board of Education case, states have implemented voucher programs to separate disadvantaged Black students. Today, those same vouchers disproportionately go to families who can already afford private education and divert resources, not just from public education, but also under this program and the design that we have in front of us and the preliminary regulations, it'll be diverting from all public good. And so we have some concerns here. The state level voucher programs, the federal initiative will fund private organizations that issue grants for educational expenses. Individuals who contribute to these organizations will receive a dollar-for-dollar tax credit up to $1,700 per year. These funds could be spent elsewhere, and we have some concerns about that. So I want to call on Ashley Harrington, who is a senior policy counsel at LDF. Ashley has had senior roles in education, research, and advocacy, including with the Senior Project on Predatory Student Lending in the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, to join us and help us learn a little bit more about this program. Ashley, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Can y'all hear me okay?
We hear you loud and clear.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I just want to give everybody some background. I actually did an incredible webinar discussion as these programs started to roll out, to inform the community, inform really the advocacy community of what's happening. Because there's so much going on, it is hard to keep track of some of these programs as they roll out. So, you are the expert here, and I'm reading from my notes. So I wanted to hear from you, Ashley. Tell us a bit about this program. Tell us, how is it going to work? I gave a little overview, but I think you might have some greater detail than I did.
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. So glad you're having this discussion. Excited to hear about this town hall you guys have coming to, because it's so important that we are talking about what this program and programs like this mean for our kids, for our schools, for our communities. I think you laid out perfectly the root of our concerns come from the fact that we know that private schools and private school voucher programs were created to evade desegregation post Brown. That was part of that massive resistance that really put that where white parents were taking their kids out of public schools and sending them to private schools, often using public tax dollars to do so they wouldn't have to go to school with Black kids. And what that created was this two-tier system. And now we're seeing the resurgence of these. States, many states. Several dozen states across this country have been creating not just opting into this program, but have created their own voucher programs in recent years. And it's the same playbook, and it's the same situation where it's because they want to create this two-tier separate system and take away educational opportunities from Black students and other students of color. And so we're absolutely concerned. And I think the federal voucher program, which, as you laid out, was created last year. This is the first ever federal private school voucher program. It was created by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that reconciliation bill that was passed last year. And it provides a dollar for dollar tax credit of up to $1,700 for families to donate to a scholarship granting organization. And so this is how it's going to work. Families, parents, individuals, you don't even have to have a kid to donate. Let's be clear, to donate to these SGOs to get that dollar for dollar tax credit, which is different than any other charitable donation where you don't get 100% of a credit for your donation. You donate to these SGOs, which are nonprofits that are supposed to then allocate vouchers to students. And eligible families are families that make up to 300% of area median income, which can be over $300,000 a year, depending on where you live, and more than over 1,300% over the federal poverty line. So we know that this is not a program that's intended to help low income kids. It's not intended to help low wealth kids. It's intended to target those children who actually already go to private schools and often already were never attending public schools to begin with. And that's what we see with voucher programs across the country. So it's a dollar for dollar tax credit, $1,700. You donate to an SGO. The SGO then will decide who gets these vouchers. So a couple of things. States have to opt into the program every year. So there is, and it's particularly important that you mentioned that your governor has not opted in, is still making decisions. So continuing to urge her not to opt in, and to urge her not to opt in every year until we're able to repeal this program is super important, because even though states have to opt in, that's kind of the end of their say in the matter.
Is that I'm sorry to jump in, Ashley. Well, because you normally with these programs, there is some level of the state interaction. Education is run on the state level. And so how is there a situation here now where the end of the conversation is just the opt-in? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So I want to preface by saying we're still waiting for the final regulations or interim final regulations from Treasury. But everything we know based on conversations we've had with Treasury and how they are reading the statute, how they are thinking about the program, lets us know that states have very little autonomy in how this program will run. What that means is if an organization meets these limited requirements for being designated an SGO, 501c3 nonprofit, 90% of their income goes to scholarship. They can keep the other 10%. They send kids to at least a certain number of public schools, and they do all of these limited requirements. The state has to include them. They can't then put on extra requirements for accountability and transparency. They can't make sure that these SGOs or the schools that they are sending vouchers to for students aren't engaging in discrimination. And we know that private schools are not subject to the same anti-discrimination laws that public schools are subject to. They are often known for having different different standards for how they're doing discipline, how they're doing admissions, and this is based on race or national origin or English language skills or even religion. And so there's no checks and balances there. If a nonprofit meets that criteria, it has to be included. And so that means that states have no real say in what that program looks like. Meanwhile, they have to spend their own state money to administer the program. So lots of folks are talking about this like this is free money. It's not free money because the state does have to administer the program and make sure that the money is getting to the kids and that the SGOs are have that support. But that's it. They don't get to have these extra requirements to make sure this program is working the way it should or that it's working for all students.
We spent a lot of time here, and we've had Christine Waters, our education committee chair, on several times to talk about a variety of education issues in state. And one of those key components of legislation that she's worked on was the Dignity for All Students Act, which we have actually there's more than just that piece of legislation in our education law. A lot of standards for our education institutions here in New York. I think very concerning to hear that there would be a prohibition on state regulations on who is eligible, which scholarship granting organizations, or even the schools that would receive these funds would be eligible and not have to meet certain requirements. We fought really hard to keep in place to protect students, to protect parents, make sure they are able to be treated fairly. Has that been a conversation so far? I saw there's some news out of Vermont that there was an attempt, and maybe Vermont or Maine, there was an attempt to try to enforce regulations or push state regulations forward. Is that where we're landing right now? None of that stuff is going to land?
Well, it's different at the state level and for state programs, but what's important about this federal program is like the federal program is not creating pathways for states to do that for this federal voucher program. Gotcha. And from our understanding, everything we know about what's going to be in these regulations is going to be a really limited avenue for states to have any say in this. And we're talking about tens of billions of dollars annually. Conservative estimates say about $25 billion a year. It could go up to $51 billion a year. That's more than we spend on Title I aid for disadvantaged kids. That's more than we spend on a lot of things, money that could go to public schools, that could go to SNAP, Medicaid, other things that we've seen cuts in recently. And we're also talking about 90% of our kids go to public schools. And so we're diverting all of this money with very little accountability and transparency, even at the state level, and sending it to schools where only 10% of kids go there, and for the majority of the time with these voucher programs, they support kids who are already going to private schools and never went to public schools to begin with.
That's incredibly concerning. The estimates are significant of how much this will cost from the taxpayer. These are federal dollars that would be going otherwise to other federal support programs. News today that Medicare Part D got cut, that we've seen already experienced the SNAP cuts have taken effect already, and hundreds of thousands of families are going hungry in New York. Is this a trade-off that we saw coming? Is this the expansion of the voucher program? Is this something that we could have anticipated?
I think that we are constantly seeing our government our politicians making trade-offs, and oftentimes it's with our children, it's with our families, our low-income families, with our Black families, our brown families, our low-income families. And so absolutely we are seeing cuts places, and in the big beautiful bill there were hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts, most of them to services and programs that impact communities of color and low-income communities directly. And so we see this, and we see this continuing. And the thing about these voucher programs is, and I think we'll see the same with the federal program, is once they get started, they don't stop growing. Even though they're still serving this same small pot of kids, they continue to take more and more money from state budgets, from the federal budget eventually. And that means that other services then get cut again. It's taking money from roads, it's taking money from public schools, it's taking money from disaster relief, from different things. And so this is just the tip of the iceberg of what it means in terms of diverting public money to a small set of folks, and not making sure that it's benefiting the community as a whole.
We appreciate that, Ashley. And I just have one more question for you. I mean, you've been on the front lines of this now in a variety of roles that you sat in. We, as we move forward, and as this program, whether it moves forward in New York or not, we're still seeing a dismantling of public education. The Department of Education is largely gone at this point. What other safeguards are left to protect public education to ensure that our kids are able to access a quality education as is, the expectation?
I think you're absolutely right. So we have to continue fighting. I'm glad you mentioned the dismantling of the Department of Education, because all this goes hand in hand with this overall effort to privatize public education and to create this two-tier system and to really determine who gets to learn and what they get to learn. And so we want to be paying attention to all of that. Follow what's going on with the Department of Education, how they're trying to transfer all of these pieces, how Congress is sitting by silently or now trying to even like say that some of these things are good. We are seeing there's like a markup in the Senate tomorrow about some of these interagency agreements to transfer functions of the Department of Education. So we need to continue highlighting how important the Department of Education is. It was first and foremost a civil rights agency. We need to highlight how important the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education is and how they are supposed to enforce the rights of our students to make sure that kids can go to healthy learning environments, and that's healthy across the board from the space itself to what they are receiving from their teachers, what they're getting from other kids to make sure they're going to schools that are free from discrimination. So fighting against that, we can also enact state level anti-discrimination Office of Civil Rights and make sure that our state has strong civil rights protections in our schools at the state level, especially when we're seeing the federal government abdicate some of that responsibility. So the Department of Education is not fully dismantled yet. I want to make sure we're highlighting that. So we should still be fighting back against this and letting our senators and members of Congress know we do not support this. We need the Department of Education. We need the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education, and we need it to be doing its job and doing the job the way it's supposed to be done to protect our kids. I cannot hear you.
There we go. So still on mute. Sorry about that. We just dropped a lot of information on folks. Where can people learn more? Do y'all have I know LDF has a petition ongoing right now, pushing for folks to call for their members of Congress to push back against these cuts. Is there anything else, any other resources you want to make available to folks? We'll put it in our link in the bio.
Absolutely. I'll send you some information from us and from some of our partners. Also, we're continuing, again, if you need materials to push your governor not to opt in to this voucher program. When the rule comes out, it's important that we comment on that. It's important to really think about how we use every tool in the toolbox: social media, phone calls to Congress, call your member, tell them you want a fully functioning Department of Education, tell them you don't support this voucher program, they need to repeal it. And so we have a number of resources. We will actually absolutely drop it in there and just tell everyone we need to support our public schools and our public school students.
We appreciate you, Ashley, and thank you so much for the work that you've continued to do to ensure that there's an equitable education system here for all of our kids. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate
it. Looking forward to hearing more about this town hall too.
Yeah, it's gonna be something. I tell you that. All right, thank you, Ashley. Listen, we have a lot of work to do, and I want to take a quick step back because I want to be clear about what is happening here and what is not happening here. I think this issue often is going to get framed as a school choice issue, which is an argument that every parent and every kid should be able to send their kid to the school of their choice. And I think that's fair. I think the truth of the matter, though, here, this is much more about a diversion of public resources to private individuals and entities, resources that are intended to ensure that our roads are paved or that our schools are funded. For years now, the students over in East Ramapo, and that's a fight that the Spring Valley, NAACP, as well as the state conference NAACP have been engaged in for some time with our partners at NICLU and other organizations. We've seen what defunding of public education looks like to divert resources from public education to private education. We've seen what happens when those who rely on a public education system that is robust and that has all the tools, for many kids, that's their meal, right? Showing up and thankfully we have a universal meals program now in New York State as of last year, but this remains a necessary place where resources have to go to ensure that our kids are taken care of. And so I want to make sure that we're properly framing the conversation. We want kids to be able and parents to be able to make the choices to send their kids wherever they want. But we've got a contract here, it's particularly in New York, where every kid is supposed to be able to access a free public education. The more we chip away, the more that we divert resources from that system, we have less to ensure that everybody is taken care of. And again, the way that this program is set up right now, this is not just a diversion of resources from education, it's a diversion of resources that could go also to healthcare, as we again see hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers losing access to care in real time, right? With the claim that there's not enough resources. Meanwhile, we're spending, quite a significant amount of money abroad. So I want to bring in our next panelist, Dr. Aisha Wilson Carter. Dr. Wilson Carter is the co-founder and president of the Long Island Strong Schools Alliance, a nonprofit founded in 2021 to support policies that strengthen education in our public schools, with a focus on critical thinking skills, civic engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's also a mother, and the inaugural executive director for equity and inclusion at Hofstra University. Dr. Wilson Carter, it's always good to be with you. We do get to spend a little bit of time together, working to protect families and working, of course, under the leadership of Christine Waters. It's great to hear from you. Ashley has been doing incredible work for a long time, and so have you. I want to first hear your reflection on, not just the program, but on the contributions and the work being done to push back and that previous conversation.
Oh, well, first of all, I was like, look, she has said it all. So I really appreciate that. And the work that LDF is doing for sure. And I just really couldn't agree more with some of the major points that were brought up about voucher programs and about how that money is diverted. And also, as you said, Chris, and how it's being framed. Just the, overview of how problematic this is. But I think I'm happy to be here and engage in this conversation about voucher, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But this is this is not a singular program or a singular initiative. This is part of the bigger picture to privatize public education, to make education generally harder for Black and brown people and low income people to attain. And so, again, I work in higher education in my daytime job, and then in my nonprofit, we work in the K through 12. But a lot of what I'm doing is that clear pipeline and how policies impact from preschool on through college and beyond. So it's just it's really important. It's a very important conversation, and I'm just so glad to be here and engage in that conversation. Again, always a pleasure to be with you.
always, and we appreciate you and your leadership and your work. And I want to start with taking a little bit of a step back, because we jumped straight in. But you, in the work that you've been doing, you've also been fighting pretty significant fights to ensure that public schools are staying open.
Yes.
And so I'm seeing the through line right now of privatization, less resources, less schools, more charter schools, for example. Can you help draw the connection for folks who may again be viewing this issue or this opportunity, the Education Freedom Tax Credit or the voucher program, as something that should be a little bit more positive and won't have the negative impact or the doom and gloom that we're kind of putting on it right now?
Yeah. So first of all, there's definitely a clear through line to school closures. And when it comes to, whether it be more charter schools popping up in certain districts, why they're popping up in specific districts, and what's happening to that money. Right. And again, just speaking factual, right. So for sure, opinion based, but factual, what happens in those charter schools and private schools generally is that because they're not held to the same standards, they are allowed to dismiss students. And so what we've seen in my research at LISA, and then a lot of my work too, as with Christine Waters, is that students and a lot of these private schools will take in students in the beginning of the year, and they'll take in the students. But as soon as the student, has some sort of behavioral issue, or the student has needs extra services that they don't provide or don't have in the building, they'll wait to a certain point. And I believe it's like after like late October, November, to then expel the student, right? And they'll find reasons to expel the student and get the student out of their building. And then the public school has to take that child back. But what happened in that meantime is because they enrolled the student in the beginning, they got all of those tax dollars. So if in your district, let's say it's $23,000 per pupil, that charter school keeps that money. And so they wait to a certain point in time to dismiss students and disenroll students after they have kept the money. And then beyond that, there's just a really clear financial link to voucher programs in school closures. So vouchers and similar programs like that move public dollars out of that district budget. And districts have, fixed costs. They have building costs, transportation, staffing, student services. So even if you're moving just a modest amount of enrollment loss, can really create the serious pressure on that district. And so research on closures shows that, about 2% of schools that close over the summer never reopen. So it's not like they get their enrollment back. So that affects, more than 200,000 students a year. And so closures are not just an urban issue, right? So it's not just in urban communities. These are definitely hit in suburban communities and rural communities alike. So, and then we find obviously that, it might not be so obvious, but the people who are most affected are students who are already from undersourced communities and undersourced districts, because again, here in our country, we decide education upon zip code, which is just basically tax dollars. So if your community is already underfunded, then first of all, you're really vulnerable to charter schools and private schools coming into your community to offer another option. And then a lot of times, right, as a parent, you're like, well, yes, I'm going to send my child here. And there's a lot of research on why people find those schools just on the outset more appealing. They think that it's more rigorous. They think that there is more structure there, but they really don't see kind of behind the scenes. And once you lift that cover. So those school closures, the defunding of those communities really affect Black and brown and low income and rural students the most. And that's what the research shows.
It sounds like it's death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, you've got displacement of students, creating the budget strain where, we're getting, a school budget's determined by the student enrollment. So you got other schools already coming to the space. And, one thing that you mentioned just now was the fact that the alternatives, people view these alternatives as better in some way. Now, there's a lot of work to do in public education in New York. We're not going to run from that. And that's the work that we do every day. But the most surefire way to make sure the schools aren't doing as well as they could is by continuing to take resources away from them. You also mentioned who's most vulnerable here. Ashley said that the most recipients of the voucher scholarships, through these types of programs are usually the existing students already in the schools. But I think as this program is being discussed, there's some contemplation of kids being able to transition from public schools to these private schools and have access to scholarship funds, etc. Are we seeing that? Is that what's happening across the country in these programs? We've got 31 states, I think, from my notes that said already have some form of voucher programs or have opted into this program. Are we seeing, schools or students from public schools transition? Ashley said that was something that wasn't happening, but what are you seeing?
No, it is absolutely not, and she's right. Just stepping back a little bit, the evidence, first of all, does not support the blanket claim that private school generally and are a better alternative and have better outcomes. The evidence just does not support and show that. A national analysis of, I think it was universal voucher states, those 31 states that have it, found that more than 90% of the voucher dollars were used by families who already send their students to private schools, just as Ashley said. So it means that it's not even creating access, right? So which a lot of people think that, oh, this is going to create access so that I'll be able to get into private schools. No, the program is, not creating any new access. It's often just subsidizing existing private school enrollment rather than allowing more people to come in. So that same analysis also found that private schools tuition rose by 5% to 10% more in voucher states than in non-voucher states. And so what that means is, because they're seeing higher enrollment, they're raising their tuition, they're making money, right? And they're making a lot of money on top of the bottom line, right? Where the public schools in those same communities are consistently being underfunded. And so it's just a snowball and a cycle, right? So if you're taking money out of the public school education, they're not getting what they need to support the students that they have. The school essentially is now under-resourced, underfunded. It's not performing as well. And then more people leave, right? So unless you get that money and those resources back in that school, it's not going to perform at the level that it could, right? And that's what we're seeing. So I think there was a Brookings report that summarizes that the last decade of achievement studies showing that there have been negative impacts to students who are not utilizing the vouchers, but in communities where vouchers are permitted in states that opted in, right? You can look into Louisiana. It's like their declines are as large as like negative 0.4 as far as the outcomes of those students. And so really from a civil rights perspective, many parents do not realize that special education rights are that they have for their child, IEPs, right? All of the resources that they need leaves when the child leaves the public school. And so that's a major concern when students are pushed into less accountable settings. And I think that was mentioned earlier too. And this is to what I said before. So they're not, if your child needs special education services or any type of special resources, they go to that private school. They're not getting it there. They're not performing as they could be performing or living up to their full potential because the resources aren't there. And then the private school turns around and gets rid of them. Right.
And similarly to the charter school process, keep the funds that they've already gotten from.
But they already have their funds. And so they're pretty much fine with that. Right. But now we have a student who is struggling and in the wind, right, and not getting what they need.
I want you to help me with this one part as well, because again, I'm trying to make sure that we are properly framing what's happening. We have an agreement, a contract, as I referred to it, that public education is going to be made available and is going to be funded by our resources. I don't think that there's always been private schools. They've always existed. I think the concern that folks have is that efforts to whittle away funds going to public education is such a significant threat to the continuation of being able to provide that service. But really, the standards that you just mentioned, the standards of care, the access to special education services, the access to or the prohibition on kids getting kicked out because of discrimination, whether it be racial or gender identity or whatever, is also gone. So we also have a regulatory gap here where we don't have the mechanisms to hold these other schools accountable in the same ways that we have within the public institutions. Is there some semblance of some policy in New York law or in New York, some policy or some statute in New York law that would extend protections? Like, is there some private claim because, now they're getting federal dollars in some way, even if it's going through, is there something that can ensure that kids who are transitioning into these programs, into these private schools, under this voucher program, could be protected? I guess is the same question I asked Ashley, but as someone centered here in New York as well, I want to make sure that we're thinking about that.
Yeah. So, and that's a really good question, and I'm not a lawyer. So I definitely a policy hack here.
Yeah.
But and I do talk to a lot of lawyers about this. What I would say, without knowing specifically what we can point to, I definitely know there are a lot of people and organizations in that fight looking for that very specific thing that we can say. What I can say is that organizations like mine and the work I do is one of the things we are doing is trying to hold those schools in every school accountable, right? So New York State with the Board of Regents puts out these policy frameworks, they put out these initiatives, right? So what we find though is that they're real up for a lot of them, they really do lack accountability measures, right? So a lot of what we want to do is implement and build these accountability measures, right? So including those that if you're taking money from the district, if you are getting money from a district as a school, then you have to uphold the same exact standards, whether that's DASA standards, whether that's, special education resources, whatever it is, they have to be held accountable and to the same measure as we would any other school in our public schools. That is such a huge gap in a lot of the laws and policies that are passed, is not having that accountability. So like I said, I do know that, organizations like, in NYCLU, like there are a lot of people working on what we can do to legally hold them responsible to those measures. But in general, as far as this fight, it is about letting Governor Hochul know, right? Letting your local legislators know, your representatives know that, hey, we have 3 charter schools in our neighborhood, in that district, fine, but they're not being held to the same standards. They don't have this, they don't have that, right? And being able to really talk about that and push for it. We fund education, right? We fund public education as citizens. So whether you have children in the school or not, those are your tax dollars, and you absolutely have a right to be making those demands from our representatives.
When I do civics education now, especially for young people, I always talk about it as us collectively, when I talk about government specifically, as the collective decision making around how we spend our money. Right. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about. It's government is the vehicle by which we collectively decide how we spend our money. And I think that's something that is incredibly concerning about this moment is the recognition that once again, we are in a place where people are being asked to fund things and not recognizing fully always how that reverberates through the rest of society based on the other decisions of things we've decided to fund. Mm-hmm. And so you are as a homeowner, funding, a security system for your home, while also allowing or not funding some other security for your community. It sounds like a backwards proposition, and I think that what I'm trying to say really is that this program itself is a step or front to the fact that we've committed to funding public education. I think that we have to understand and appreciate that. And I want to say, just as a last question, I just want to hear your thoughts on this. There's been this effort, obviously, this meant to publication. I made the same comment to Ashley. How does this fit, actually, right? Is it just about this diversion of resources? Is it about sowing discontent, where we just continue to defund these institutions where people stop believing in them? Mm-hmm. And we have a ton of school districts across the state that are underfunded and don't have the best test scores or results coming out of them, and the students aren't prepared. And we've seen reports of students who are graduating high school and can't read. is this part of that effort, or am I viewing that properly? Am I situating this as just another effort, a way to pull out, like the Jenga tower, pull out another piece to make sure that things can't stand?
Absolutely. So this is all about the dismantling, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen, and these things have always existed. There have always been people pushing for these type of things, but we've seen a very concerted effort the last couple of years to really downplay and right now I'm can't think of the word right now, but downplay and anti-intellectualism. So we've seen a huge push for that. And why? Because we know a more educated public makes better decisions, right? So they make better decisions for themselves, better decisions for their community, better decisions for society at a whole. If you want different things, if you want to privatize everything, you want to hoard money for the very top 1%, you do not want an educated public. And this is how I would frame it, is absolutely a part of the overall strategy, right? So again, I'm in higher ed. A huge dismantling, right? So not only are we dealing with a demographic cliff, one of the biggest issues with enrolling in higher ed right now is non-consumers. And not that there aren't other paths, right? Trade school, there are so many different paths that we take. It's not that everyone has to go to school, but people who have education themselves, college degrees themselves, are now turning against it and saying, well, why do you need that, right? You're going to get woke, or whatever the case may be, right? All these strange claims that they make, and it's not necessary. There's so many things up against education right now, and it is a clear strategy. It's been in play for a while. So what I would say specifically about the voucher program is that I would kind of frame it this way, that it really does fit into the broader federal strategy to normalize, right? So what they want to do is normalize publicly financed private schooling. And that's what they want to do. So they want to do it in higher ed, taking all the grants away. Anything to take money away from students themselves to get an education, right? They're doing it with the school loans. They're doing it by literally causing people to default on their loans, because the new repayment plans are sometimes increasing people's payments 200 to 300%. Yeah. They know what they're doing, right? They know that people are not going to be able to afford that. They're going to default on that. And so if you're defaulting on your loans, you're not going to send your kids to school. It's too unaffordable. Let's not do that, right? So the whole entire basis is to have a less educated public, right? And public school is a right. It is a right, right? Yeah. We pay into that. It is a right. It's not something that they're giving us. No, public schools are right. Public education, K through 12, is a right for every American citizen and beyond that, right? Anyone that's here. So the Department of Education specifically says that Education Freedom Tax Credit is the largest national expansion of educational freedom. That's how they'll frame it, as you were saying too. Oh, it's about school choice, right? And we know that that's not really what it is. The Treasury, I think, says participating states that opt in will have, they have to submit required lists of scholarship granting organizations. So now they're going to look at any organizations that are associated with the school, right? So again, what are you providing as content? What is the education, and who's allowed to get this education? They want to be able to control that. So, it's been argued that this shifts the public dollars away from public schools towards private and religious schooling. and it weakens accountability, and it leaves the public schools really scrambling for fewer resources to serve the students who do remain there, right? And that's that snowball effect that I was talking about. So in the sense, it really is not just about this standalone program. It is really a part of this larger strategy and push to redirect public investment away from public institutions, to get us to trust them less, to privatize any and everything they can so that a handful of people make all of the money in whatever that is. And you know, I'll just say that public schools are really not just schools. When we're looking at this attack on schools, we might be personally invested because we have kids in schools, they're in our communities, but they are really they're neighborhood institutions, right? You know, your property value is tied to the public school, right? So many things are tied to this. So civil rights institutions are tied to public schools, and it really is the foundation of opportunity, right? To move forward. So we need to be strengthening them and not really draining them. If depending on what we want in a society.
Well, you said already, this is an effort to make sure that we have a less educated populace, so that they're not able to defend themselves or make better decisions. But we're the NAACP, so we're going to educate them anyways. And so I know we've got a town hall coming up. I want you to say a little bit more about what's in the works and you know, the work that we're doing collectively to ensure that our communities, the communities we serve, are educated and prepared.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this town hall. I think we're solidifying booking room right now and everything. So I think the goal, the kind of major goals of the town hall are really be to share the information about the federal voucher program, about where New York State stands at that, what the impacts will be to Black public school students and educators. And we really want to encourage the audience to take action. So we'll have a panel, we'll view a film, a short little film or excerpt about the school to prison pipeline. Again, because all of these things are connected, but there'll be policy experts, there'll be legislators there, there'll be educators, there'll be school administrators, parents, and people who really understand and can speak firsthand about the voucher program and how it undermines public education. Hopefully, again, Hofstra has done some research in this area in our local Long Island area. So hopefully we can have a couple people there to talk about that specifically. And so what we really hope is that everyone who intends will leave knowing how that federal voucher program might impact their very specific community and how they can go about taking action against it and letting Governor Hochul know that you support public education, you do not agree with this voucher program, amongst other things that, you know, as far as accountability measures for both private schools and public schools alike, and really being able to have a kind of clear action plan about how to take action.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, for all the work that you do. Your leadership is recognized and appreciated in our community. So thank you so much, Dr. Wilson-Carr. Looking forward to the event.
Yes.
It's going to be a good one. We're going to be posting and sending out flyers and blasting, you know, promotion, I think, starts soon. So, you know, we're looking forward to it. And thank you so much again for hosting us.
Thank you so much, of course. And thank you so much for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. You know, it's one of those issues, the Education Freedom Tax Credit Program, or I have been calling it the voucher program with extra steps, that, you know, sometimes we get lost in the complexity of things. I think a great way to frame this issue, again, has just been taking public dollars from public good and giving it to others who are pursuing private interests. And again, parents can choose to send their kids where they want to send them. There's no issue with that. I think the issue is that the divestment of resources, the taking away of resources from the broader public good, especially dollars intended to go to the public good. We've seen an incredible amount of grift and redirection of resources under this administration. And so we want to continue to push and raise this conversation because it starts with education. We can't defend ourselves. We can't strengthen our communities if we don't do the work to educate ourselves, our neighbors, our communities. It's all necessary. So want to make sure that you all are staying tuned to our website for more information on how to take action. As we mentioned earlier, LDF already has a petition circulating. You'll see it in the description box under the video as it posts. But please stay tuned to our website for more information. That upcoming event is going to be August 17th on the campus of Hofstra University. But you all, as participants and members of our community, will be receiving notices in a variety of ways, including by pigeon, related to this event. So looking forward to seeing you all there and making sure that you're a part of the fight. I mentioned our democracy summits, so I want to go back to that real quick. Be sure to email civic engagement at nysnaacp.net. If you're interested, if you're a partner doing democracy work, doing election protection work, voter engagement work, interested in participating in our summits or engaging with our leaders, please send an email there to get more information on how you can join us. You also find the email address in the description as well. And lastly, I just want to make another pitch for membership. Part of the work that we continue to do in preparing our communities is also giving folks voice, reminding them of their power. You've probably heard me say that quite a few times. That's the work of the association. That's the work of the state conference, is making sure that people are prepared to defend their communities. And that starts with access to information, to making sure that we have access to experts like Ashley, like Dr. Wilson Carter. These are folks who are on the front lines every day fighting for you, fighting for your communities. And these issues are not simple always. It's not always black and white. There's always a little bit of nuance. And we want to make sure that you have that, so you're able to give language to the experience that you all are facing. This fight against this program is rooted in local concerns about keeping public dollars in public schools and committed to the public good. If there's a local issue in your community that you care about, I guarantee there's a solution. There's always a solution to these problems. You just got to be willing to engage. And this state conference, this association is committed to working towards those solutions. You heard from our guests tonight how important it is to get involved and become a member. We've got 52 branches across the state, from Buffalo to Brooklyn. You can go to nysnaacp.org to find yours. Join us, come to the next meeting, bring a friend, come with us to Albany. Let's bang on some doors. We're here to help you translate that frustration and concerns into future action and measurable change. We're fighting forward. We're fighting for a fairer and more just New York. So on behalf of the state conference and our executive leadership, our members across the state, we want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.